Hello and welcome to the first activity in Connected Falkirk and DigiLearnFalk's Codemas activities. In this activity we're going to be creating a festive game using Scratch. The game that we are going to create looks something like this. So this is based on an old arcade game called Pong, but we've made it festive by using snowflakes as the ball. By the end of this video, you'll have made your own version of this game. So are we ready to get started? Great, let's go. So the first thing that we need to do is we have to open Scratch. Now you may already have this as an app downloaded, but I'm going to be using the web version today. So if you're using the web version, you want to open Safari, which is the compass icon that's on your homepage screen, and you want to open a new tab. Then you want to type in Scratch, and when the search engine opens, it should be the one right at the top that's from MIT. If you open it, the first thing we want to do is we want to choose Create, because we're going to make this from the beginning, so from scratch. So Create is in the top left-hand corner, and it'll say Creating Project and Blocks, and it should open a screen that looks like this. Now, the Scratch screen, if you've not used it before, there's a few important points. So on the left-hand side, you have your coding blocks. Each of them are coloured to make it easier under different menus. So if you're wanting to change the look of what you're coding, you would go into the purple menu. If you want to add control, you can go into the orange menu. So I'll refer to the colours as we go through. We're not going to use costumes and sounds at the moment, so we're just going to stay within coding. And what we do when we want to code something is we drag the block and we drag it into the middle, which is our coding screen essentially here. And whatever is in that coding part will then play whenever we hit the green flag that's on the top right hand side. If I want to get rid of a block, I just drag it to the left and drop it and it'll disappear. You can also attach blocks together. So if I put a block in and then I add another block to it, I can attach it, and it's quite easy to see where you can attach things and where they combine together. On the right hand side, you can see my first sprite, which is a cat. We're not going to use this sprite today, so we will delete it in a second. But when you play your code by tapping that green flag, in this little window on the right hand side, you'll see what your code does, because it's really, really important as you're coding to always check what the code does and to play it and make sure there's no bugs as you go along. So that's the main parts of our screen: our coding menu on the left, our coding part which is in the middle, and then the bit where we can play our code through. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to get rid of our cat, because we don't want a cat in our Winter Wonderland scene. So we're going to tap the cat and you'll see it's highlighted, and then you want to tap the little bin on the top right hand side to get rid of it. Now we want to make sure that our game is wintry, so we want to choose a nice wintry scene, and to do that we're going to go to backdrops. So on the bottom right of your screen you'll see a part that says stage, and it'll say backdrop 1 and there'll be a blank backdrop at the moment. Well, we want to choose a nice wintry backdrop. So you're going to tap the button at the bottom right hand side of your screen that looks like a picture, and then you're going to tap the little magnifying glass, which is the search button. Now you can draw your own backgrounds, you can upload your own, but we're just going to go nice and easy and choose one from scratch today. So tap the magnifying glass and you'll be faced with lots of different backdrops that you can use. I am going to choose the winter backdrop on the left hand side here, but you can choose whatever one you want. So I'll give you a second just now to find the backdrop that you would like for your scene. When you tap it, you'll now see it as the backdrop on the right hand side, but you'll also find that it now says backdrops 2 under stage. Now we don't want 2 different backdrops, we just want this one, so we'll need to get rid of that other one. To get rid of it, we'll go to the top left hand side, and beside code there's a bit that says backdrops. If we tap that, you'll see our winter backdrop that we've selected, but you'll also see the plain backdrop. We just want to tap it and then tap that same little bin icon to get rid of it, and that just leaves our winter backdrop. Once you've done that, we're just going to go back to code, and that takes us back to our main screen. The next thing that we want to do is we want to add a sprite. So in Scratch, sprites are the things that move or that interact with our characters. Now, I said we wanted to have a snowflake that's going to be bounced around our screen. So on the bottom right hand side, not the picture button that we've used for the backdrop already, but the one that looks like a little cat, if you tap that, you get a very similar menu that allows you to upload or draw or search. We are going to use the search function, so the little magnifying glass again, and that'll allow us to choose our sprite. So in here you have lots of different sprites that you can possibly use, but I want a snowflake. So I'm going to type in the search bar, snowflake, and I'm going to tap the snowflake icon here. Once we've added our snowflake, you might notice that it's quite large at the moment. If this was bouncing around our screen, it's going to be very, very easy to catch it. So we want to resize our snowflake. To resize it, there's a bit that says size and 100 at the moment when I'm tapping on my snowflake. I want to tap that 100. I want to delete it and change it to 25. When you've written 25, you then hit enter on the right hand side and you'll see your snowflake has changed size. 25 I found is a really good size for this game. If you want to change it, you can, and you can always come back later and edit your code if you want to make it harder or easier. So you could have it that's a very, very tiny snowflake, but at the moment, let's keep it at 25 just so that we can keep it the same as mine at the minute. So when we tap on the snowflake, this coding bit in the middle, you can see there's a little snowflake icon in the top right in that middle section, and that means that we are adding code under that snowflake. This is really, really important because when we add more sprites, you want to make sure you're always coding under the correct one. So we're going to start coding our snowflake. So under our snowflake code, we want to have something happen when we hit the green flag, so when we start the game. So we want to go to the menu on the left that says events, which is the yellow menu. And right at the top, there is a block that says when green flag clicked. So if we drag that block into our snowflake coding section here. So that means when the green flag is clicked, something is going to happen. So I want it to move. So I want my snowflake to start moving if I click the green flag. So we're going to go to the blue menu, which is motion, and we're going to drag over the block that says move 10 steps, and we're going to put that under the when green flag ticked. Make sure they're actually together and they're not just sitting separately. Make sure they're clicked together. Now at this point, it's good to test if this is working. So I want you to tap that green flag and see what happens. Now if you find you click it multiple times, you can see it's starting to move to the right and it's moving 10 steps each time I click it. Now that's not really what I want. I want to make sure that it keeps moving, okay? It doesn't just move 10 steps and stop every time I start the game because that wouldn't be very fun. So we're going to go into the control section, which is the orange section, and there's a block that's called forever. I want you to drag that block out and I want you to put it under when green flag clicked and with the middle bit where move 10 steps already is. So you should have it looking like this. And what this means is when I click the green flag, I want my snowflake to move 10 steps, but I want it to keep moving 10 steps forever. Now, if I click my green flag, you'll see that it moved. Now you might see that it's already kind of got to the edge of the screen, and that is absolutely fine. It's because it's hit that edge that we've now got an issue. So it's going to keep going until it hits an edge. Now that's also an issue because I want it to bounce. So I want it to bounce back, and to do that I want to find a blue block, so under motion, and I want to find the one that says if on edge bounce. So you'll scroll down and you'll see this one here. So I want to drag this block over and I want to put it under move 10 steps. Now you can see on the right hand side what now happens is that my snowflake is forever moving 10 steps once I've clicked that green flag, but if it gets to an edge, it bounces off and it goes in the other direction. Make sure yours is working like this before we move on to the next stage. So this is looking better, but it's not that I just want to go back and forward. That's not a very fun game if my snowflake is just moving back and forward in the same way over and over and over again. So I want to get to a point where it moves in a certain direction. So what we want to do with this one is we want to stay within that blue motion menu and we want to find a block that says point in direction 90. So it's right here. And I want to take this block and I want to add it between the when the green flag is clicked and the forever. So I'm going to drop that there. Now let's try this. So if I tap that, it's still going in the same direction. The problem is that we've said 90, so 90 degrees, so it's always going to go left and right there. If we tap the 90, you can decide what direction you want it to go in when it first starts. Now I'm going to do 45, so dragging my wee counter around to 45, and then I'm going to tap the green flag, and you can see that now my snowflake's bouncing around in lots of different directions. Now you can decide what number you want to set this to. Maybe I want it to go this way. So now every time I click start, it's going to go off in the left, up the way direction. You decide what you want to set it to. I'm going to keep it as 45, I think at the moment, towards the right, but you decide. And if you want to stop this playing on the right hand side, you just hit the red button. So now I've done that, I've got my snowflake and it's bouncing around and that's great, but that's again not much of a game. I want to add in a paddle that I can use to hit the snowflake and to make it bounce in different directions and try and stop it from hitting the bottom of my screen. So if I want to add a paddle, I need to add another sprite. I want to go back to that bottom right hand side where there's the little cat button, tap it and tap the magnifying glass again, and I want to type in paddle and then select. So now you'll see that there's now a paddle on my screen, and when I click it, I'm now coding my paddle and not my snowflake. Now at the moment it is in the middle of the screen, so I don't really want it to be in the middle screen, I want to drag it to the bottom. So I want you to tap your green paddle on the screen on the right hand side so you can move it, and I want you to move it to the bottom middle of your screen, just a little bit up, not right at the bottom because we're going to add something there later. So a little bit up, add that green paddle. Now it's up to you if you want your paddle to be green. You can actually change the colour of this by tapping on the top left hand side beside code, there's a button that says costumes. If you tap costumes and you tap your green paddle, you can change the fill or the outline to be a different colour. So it might be that you want to change it to blue, and I'm going to change both of them to a nice blue colour. You can make it solid, or you can make it so it's got a gradient. You can play about with it to get whatever colour you want here, but I'm going to have mine as blue. When you're ready, tap back to the code section and we're going to code our paddle once everyone's at this stage. Okay, so our paddle, we want it to move across the screen where our finger moves, but we don't want the paddle to just move anywhere on the screen. We want it to just move left and right. We don't want it to be able to go up and down. So that is what we call in an X plane. So we want to say that when the green flag is clicked, we want our paddle to forever go towards our finger, but only along left and right. So to do this, we're under our paddle, so make sure you've tapped your paddle, and then we want to go to events and drag across the when green flag clicked, because we want this to happen from the start of the game. We also want to use that forever loop again, so we want to go to the orange control section and we want to drag the forever block and put it under the when green flag clicked. Now we want the paddle to move, so this is to do with motion, so we want to go to our blue menu next, and we want to say set X to, and we want to put that within our forever loop. Now we want to set our X so that it moves to our mouse pointer, okay? So we want to go to the sensing menu, which is the light blue menu, and we want to go down until we find the one that says mouse X. And this is a bit of a tricky bit. I want you to drag this over and I want you to put it where the 2 is just now. So what this means is that when we start the game, wherever our finger is, our paddle's going to move to, but it's only going to move left and right and not up and down. So try that just now, and you should be able to drag your finger across and move that paddle. Now what you're going to find is that it doesn't actually do anything. Whenever it hits our snowflake, nothing happens because we haven't coded it to do anything when snowflake touches the paddle. So we need to go back into the snowflake and we need to add some code to it. So I want you to go back into snowflake and make sure you're there and you're not still under the paddle. And when we're in snowflake, we're going to add some code. So we want it to do something if it touches the paddle. We want it to move somewhere else on the screen. So we want to go to control and we want to find the block that says if then. So this block here. And we want to put it under if on edge, but within that forever loop. So we don't want it to go under here, we don't want it to go above it, we want to just put it under if on edge bounce. So if my snowflake touches the paddle, so we're already in snowflake, so we want to add touching paddle. So we want to go to the sensing one, which is the light blue menu again, and we want to take this block that's at the top that says touching mouse pointer, and we want to add it to this little box here. Now I don't want it to do something if the snowflake touches the mouse pointer, I want it to do something if it touches the paddle. So we want to go down to where it says paddle, so the drop down menu, and choose paddle. So if it touches the paddle, I want it to do something, and what I want it to do is I want the snowflake to turn and I want it to bounce off and go in a different direction. So we want to go back to our blue menu for motion, and we want to find the one that says turn, and we want to find the one that says turn 15 degrees. Now you can choose which of the two turn blocks you want, it doesn't actually matter, and we want to put it there. Now if we try this, it's going to turn 15 degrees and it's going to bounce off, but it's going to keep turning in the same direction. Now that's not very fun if we know what way it's going to go, so we want it to choose a random way to bounce. So to do that, we're going to go to our green menu that says operators, and we want to find the block that says pick random 1 to 10, and we want to drag this into the bit that says 15. Now I want it to bounce anywhere between 170 degrees to 180 degrees. Now you can play about with this and choose which degrees you want to use. What you'll find sometimes is if you choose the wrong one, it might bounce down the way, and we don't want that. But if you try 170 to 190, we'll give that a shot just now. And once that happens, you should be able to play it, and it should bounce in a random direction now. Now that's great, but we also might want it to maybe speed up once it leaves. So we've had it where it sets off at 10 steps at a time, but we might want it to speed up a little bit. So we're going to go back to motion, and we're going to find the block that says move 10 steps, and we're going to put it under the turn one, and we're going to change this to 15. And hopefully you'll find that when it hits it, it then bounces off a little bit quicker. Now, that's us got our snowflake where it hits our paddle and it bounces off again in a random direction and it speeds up a little bit. So it's working really, really well so far. What we want to do now is if the snowflake falls below the paddle and we miss hitting it, we want the game to stop. So what we have to do is we have to add a line to the bottom of our game, a red line, where if it hits the red line, the game's going to stop working. So we need to add another sprite. So we want to go down to our cat again, and our search bar that we've used to choose our snowflake and our paddle so far. And we want to type in line. And what should happen is you'll get this big line that's now in our screen. We want to take this down and we want to put it right at the bottom of our screen. So the paddle needs to be above it. And it's a little bit fiddly, you're going to have to play about with it. But we want the paddle to be above the line just by a little bit. Once we've done that, you're then going to tap your line and make sure you're under the line for coding. So when our green flag is clicked, so again, we're just going to go to our events menu or yellow menu and put that green flag clicked in. When it's clicked forever, if the snowflake is touching the line, then I want to make sure the game stops. So we want to put in another forever loop. So go into control and put in forever. And then we want to go to the just below that, to that if and then statement that we used before and put it in the middle of the forever loop. And we want to have this happen if the red line is touching the snowflake. So if you remember from before, we want to go to the light blue menu to sensing, and we want to take that touching and put it in that little box. But we're not going to have it when it's touching the mouse pointer, it's when it's touching the snowflake. So drop down menu and change to snowflake. If it touches it, we want the game to end. So we want to go to control and scroll down and take the button that says stop all and put it in the middle. So let's give this a try by playing our game. So if it hits the snowflake, it's fine. But if the snowflake hits the red line, the game is going to stop and the snowflake's going to stop bouncing. Perfect. So that's us got most of our game sorted. The last thing that we want to do is we want to add a counter, because I want to know how many times that we manage to catch the snowflake and make it bounce before it falls too far. So to do this, we need to add a variable. So to add a variable, we're going to go to the darker orange menu and we're going to tap the button at the top that says make a variable. We're then going to type in score, and we're going to have it create it for all sprites, and we're going to tap OK. So now you'll see in that menu, there's now a selected block that says score. So we've created a variable that's going to count how many times we do something. You'll also notice on your screen with your Wintry Wonderland background that there's now a bit at the top that says score, and that's going to be there the whole way through the game so that we can add to it. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we've got under our snowflake the code to add the score. So I want you to tap snowflake and you should be back to this screen. And what we want to do is we want to, at the start of the game, set our score to 0. So we want to take the block that says set my variable to 0 and we want to put it under when green flag clicked. Then we want to tap my variable and tap score. So that set our score to 0 at the start of the game. So even if we've had a high score before, it's going to be back to 0 again whenever we restart. Every time my snowflake touches the paddle, I want it to add 1 to my score. So what we need to do is take the change my variable by 1 block and put it under the if touching paddle, because that's when we want it to add 1 to the score. So if we drop that in there and change my variable to score, that should work. So let's give it a try. Hit your green flag. Now sometimes what you might find is it doesn't start, you might have to hit it a few times. And here we go, every time a snowflake touches my paddle, it's going to add 1 to my score in the top left. There we go. And if I let it drop, it'll stop the game. Perfect. So that's your game complete. If you want to improve it or tinker with it, then you can. I'm sure you're going to have lots of amazing ideas of how you can make it better. Maybe you could add objects that appear and are worth points if your snowflake hits them. Maybe you could add a countdown timer or different levels by changing the backgrounds. Maybe you could add some bad objects that if they fall and you have to try and avoid them with your paddle while you're still trying to catch the snowflake. It's completely up to you, and we'd love you to share the ideas that you have for tinkering with us through Twitter or X or through emailing us. If you want to play your game on full screen, you just go to the top right hand side and tap the full screen button and you can play it from here. Perfect. Please share your game with others in your school and maybe take this to other classes and see if they want to play it, or you can teach them how to do it yourself. That would be really lovely to see, and we really hope you enjoyed making your first festive game. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to try out the other Codemas games this month.